In this screencast, we're going to take a look at part of Chapter 16 from our study guide, Empires and Other Political Systems. Here's a summary of the chapter. About 1450, a major global transition took place with the withdrawal of the Chinese from global interactions and the rise of European dominance. The Byzantine Empire fell to the power of the Ottoman Turks, an empire which by 1750 was in decline. Russia emerged from Mongol control to forge an empire under the rule of the Romanovs. New patterns of world interactions formed as societies of the Eastern and Western hemispheres exchanged cultural traditions across the Atlantic Ocean. Continuing on to page 152, Spain and Portugal in the Americas. In the mid and late 15th centuries, events that took place on the Iberian Peninsula culminated in an encounter between Western Europe and the Americas. The Iberian Peninsula is where Spain is, and Portugal. This encounter profoundly altered the government and society of the peoples of the Americas. In the mid-15th century, Portuguese establishment of a navigation school increased exploration of the western and eastern coasts of Africa. The knowledge and wealth obtained from these ventures created further interest in expeditions of exploration and colonization. In Spain, the marriage of Fernando of Aragon and Isabel of Castile in the mid-15th century united the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile. This union gave its support to three significant events in Spanish history in 1492. Number 1, the Reconquista, or the reconquest, of former Spanish territory from the Muslims with the fall of Granada. Number 2, the expulsion of Jews who refused to convert to Christianity. Spain would suffer serious economic repercussions or consequences with the removal of the Jews, who were some of its most well-educated and skilled people. And finally, the first voyage of Columbus. The unification of central Spain and the end of warfare with the Muslims freed the Spanish monarchs to turn their attention to voyages of exploration. The Spanish-sponsored voyage of Ferdinand Magellan, beginning in 1519, not only circumnavigated or went all the way around the globe, but also gave Spain a basis for its colonization of the Philippines in the late 16th century. Spain's empire, control in the Caribbean. Spain's interests in the Americas began in the Caribbean. During his second voyage in 1493, Columbus established a colony on Santo Domingo. In the 16th century, the Spaniards took control of Puerto Rico and Cuba and settled in Panama and the northern coasts of South America. Spanish control of these regions introduced European diseases to the Native Americans, an exchange that significantly decreased the native population. The Spanish crown granted Caribbean natives to the conquerors for use as forced labor or slaves. Conquest in the Americas. In the 15th century, the once mighty empires of the Aztecs and Incas fell to the Spaniards. Tales of riches in the interior of Mexico led the Spaniard Hernán Cortés to attempt the conquest of the Aztec Empire. The Spaniards were aided in their venture by several factors. First, Indian allies from among native peoples who had been conquered by the Aztecs. The legend of Quetzalcoatl, Montezuma II, the Aztec leader at the time of the conquest, believed that Cortés may have been the god who was expected to return to Mesoamerica. Next, superior Spanish weaponry. Next, the assistance of a Malinche called Doña Marina by the Spanish, an Aztec woman who served as interpreter between the Spanish and the Aztecs. Smallpox, introduced into the Aztec Empire by one infected member of the Cortes expedition, it caused the death of thousands. On the completion of the Aztec conquest in 1521, the capital of Tenochtitlan was burned to the ground, and a new capital, Mexico City, was constructed on its site. The Spaniards then continued their conquests into north-central Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras. The Spaniards also turned their attention to the region of the Andes Mountains of western South America. By 1535, Francisco Pizarro had conquered the rich Inca Empire, already weakened by years of civil war. The Spaniards then sent expeditions from northern Mexico into what is now the southwestern portion of the United States. From 1540 to 1542, Francisco de Coronado reached as far north as what is now Kansas in an unsuccessful search for 7 mythical cities of gold. Further campaigns of exploration led to the conquest of Chile and the establishment of the city of Buenos Aires in present-day Argentina. By the late 16th century, the Spaniards had set up about 200 urban centers in the Americas. Despite constant threats from Caribbean pirates, Spanish galleons carried loads of gold and silver across the Atlantic Ocean to Spain, where the influx of such large quantities of the precious metals caused inflation of the Spanish economy. That means rising prices. Eventually, inflation spread throughout Europe, meaning prices rose very high throughout Europe. And until the 18th century, the Manila galleons sailed the Pacific, transporting silver from the mines of Spain's American colonies to China to trade for luxury goods. The pursuit of gold and adventure was not the sole motive for the founding of a Spanish colonial empire. Another goal was the desire to spread the Roman Catholic faith to native peoples. Roman Catholic religious orders such as the Jesuits, Dominicans, and Franciscans established churches and missions where they educated the Indians and taught them the Christian faith. The Roman Catholic faith became an integral element in the society of the Spanish colonies. The right of the Spaniards to govern their American colonies was established by papal decree, which means by the Pope, through the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494. This agreement divided the newly discovered territories between the Catholic countries of Spain and Portugal by drawing an imaginary line around the globe. Spain received the right to settle the lands to the west of the line drawn through the Western Hemisphere, and Portugal those to the east. Spanish governments in the Americas was a massive bureaucracy controlled from Spain by the Council of Indies. The council was further divided by 2 viceroyalties, one centered in Mexico City and the other in Lima, which is in present-day Peru. The economic structure of Spain's American colonies was the encomienda system. Encomiendas were grants from the Spanish crown that allowed the holders to exploit the Indians living on the land they controlled. In Peru, the exploitation of Indians took the form of the mita, or forced labor, especially in the silver mines. After Father Bartolomé de las Casas spoke out against the mistreatment of the Indians, the encomienda system was restructured as the repartimiento. The new system allowed a small salary to be paid to Indian laborers. Spanish-American society. Spanish-American society took on a hierarchical structure. 4 basic classes emerged. First, peninsulares, These were colonists born in Europe. The Peninsulares initially held the most powerful positions in the colonial society. Secondly was criollos or creoles. These were colonists born in the Americas of European parents. Generally well educated and financially secure, the creoles would eventually become the colonial leaders and organizers of colonial independence movements. Third is mestizos. These are people of mixed European and Indian ancestry. And finally is mulattoes, people of mixed European and African ancestry. The mestizos and mulattoes occupied the lowest political and social positions in the Spanish-American society. Families in the Spanish and Portuguese American colonies were patriarchal, which means men held the power. Women were expected to devote themselves to traditional household and childbearing duties. Lower-class women worked in the fields and sometimes managed small businesses. Women could control their dowries, however, and they could also inherit property. Portugal's empire. The Portuguese colony of Brazil became the first colony based on a plantation economy. Founded by Pedro Cabral in 1500, Brazil was settled in 1532 by Portuguese nobles. Sugar plantations using Indian labor arose. When the Indians died of European diseases, slaves were brought from Africa. Labor in Brazilian gold mines also was supplied by Indians and African slaves. Society in Brazil followed a hierarchy similar to that of the Spanish colonies, and Roman Catholicism was introduced by Jesuit missionaries. In addition to Brazil, the Portuguese Empire included colonies and trade outposts in Africa and Asia. That's the excerpt that we're going to read from this chapter of the study guide. Please be sure to complete your questions and post them on your website.